Speaker.
The Honourable Chris Finlayson.
Rorangatira mā tēnei taku mihi atu kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm tempted to begin by saying, Alleluia, the bill is finally before the House, but I don't want to sound like an evangelist preacher or Mr. Ockhamvole from the West Coast, so I'm going to confine my comments to saying I'm absolutely delighted that the bill is finally in here. It captures years and years of work on the part of all of those represented in the gallery today and their advisors, and the good work, the great work of the Office of Treaty Settlements. After I became the Minister at the end of 2008, I was told that the agreements in principle for these iwi were getting to a stage where they could be signed. Well, in February 2009 they were signed, and then I was told, well, we should be able to get them through to deed of settlement and then to legislation reasonably quickly. Well, it became something of a Homeric epic. The first deed of settlement was signed with Ngāti Kuia on Labour weekend, as I recall it, and then the Rangatane settlement was signed on a very important day, 4 December 2010, and I'm still grateful to Richard Bradley for the birthday cake. And then the Ngāti Tama deed was signed just a couple of weeks ago to conclude the signing of all the deeds of settlement. And in between those dates, there's been a huge amount of work which has been put in by all the people in the gallery to seeing that this legislation could be introduced today. There are so many people I wish to acknowledge, and I think it's entirely appropriate that they be acknowledged in Hansard for their contributions. The two previous speakers have referred to what the legislation is about, and I'll say a little bit more in a couple of minutes. But I just want to say this. Earlier in the week we signed a deed of settlement with Ngāi Tūhoi, and I said, and it was reported on television and in the papers, that if people doubt the validity of the exercise we're undertaking, they should read the facts, read the historical facts. And the historical facts for these iwi are set out in various parts of the legislation. And as always happens, over the last few days I've had some unpleasant emails saying, well, where are the facts, and there's no basis for this claim, and Tūhoi don't deserve things, and no doubt I'll get it after this legislation. But any fair-minded person who reads the facts of what happened at the top of the South Island will understand exactly why this legislation is necessary and why this historical process that we're working through is absolutely necessary for the future of our land. So I do want to stand here and acknowledge the iwi negotiators who have worked so very hard to get to this stage. As I said, the negotiations have been long. They have been very, very testing. There have been numerous stops and starts, but it's only because of their commitment, the commitment of negotiators, of the trustees and the iwi members, that we're here today. You have my sincere respect, and I salute all of you. As has been said, there are 8 settlement bills that are going to be enacted through this omnibus bill, so there are numerous acknowledgements. If I miss out anyone, then I apologise. The Ngāti Apa settlement would not have been possible without the dedication of the Ngāti Apa Ki Te Waiponamu Trust. Peter Mason, Brendan Wilson, Paia Riwaka Herbert are just a few of the people who represented Ngāti Apa over these years. And I particularly want to pay tribute to the late Kath Hemi, a wonderful woman, a strong woman, who was instrumental in leading the charge in the tribunal, but sadly is not with us today to witness this occasion, and taking the deed to her on the morning we signed the deed of settlement. She was in Wairau Hospital so that she could sign it was a real honour. Te Runanga o Ngāti Kuia Charitable Trust, through their wisdom and patience, have made a settlement possible for their iwi. Mark Moses, Ray Smith, Waihaere Mason represented Ngāti Kuia throughout the settlement negotiations, and their commitment deserve mention today. Te Runanga a Rangatane Wairau Incorporated Society have made the Rangatane settlement a reality through the hard work and dedication and the perseverance of Judith MacDonald, the ever-optimistic Richard Bradley and Geoffrey Hines. He wanted me to say that. The Ngāti Koata Trust, with their intelligence and commitment, have made the Ngāti Koata settlement possible. Roma Hippolyte, Alan McGregor Hippolyte, Jeanette Grace have proudly represented that great iwi and have to be recognised for their hard work. And it's because of the dedication of the Ngāti Rārua Iwi Trust and their efforts and determination that Ngāti Rārua have achieved this milestone. Ropata Stevens, Lee Luke, Barry Mason, Molly Luke, whom I see in the gallery today, they carried the Ngāti Rārua flag through negotiations and have to be mentioned for their fantastic efforts. The Ngāti Tama settlement would not have been possible without the zeal and perseverance, the hard work and commitment of Robert McEwen, Fred Tamiha and Joe Westrup. Through the hard work and diligence of the Te Atiawa Mana Whenua, Ki Te Tau Ihu Trust and the Te Atiawa settlement was made possible. And I salute Harvey Ruru, Sharon Gemmell and Glenys Payne, who have championed Te Atiawa's interests. Te Runanga o Toa Rangatira Incorporated, through Te Kaha, their negotiations team, have secured the Ngāti Toa settlement. Matthew Ray, and I particularly acknowledge Mr. Ray this morning, he has fought the good fight for his iwi for well over a quarter of a century. Te Ratu Williams, Iwi Nicholson and Te Ariki Wanira Jr. staunchly represented Ngāti Toa. And it is appropriate, I've mentioned Kath Hemi, but there are others who began this journey and are no longer with us, people like Chris Atutahi and Janice Manson. But most importantly, I acknowledge those who suffered because of the acts or omissions of the Crown and those tribunal claimants who have carried the burden of their tipuna's claims. So thank you very much for all you have done. Thank you for your patience. There were many times I said the bill is just around the corner, and for some of you it became one of the great litanies of the time. But we're here, and I acknowledge all of you for your tremendous work. There are some other people I want to mention before I briefly traverse the bill. I want to acknowledge the Crown negotiators. Ross Phillipson started it. Paul Swain, such a good fellow, helped with the negotiations. I also acknowledge PCO. They are, in my mind, increasingly the unsung heroes of the legislative process. Without their dedication, this Leviathan bill would not be able to be introduced. And so to Bill Moore and his team, I say thank you. It is an omnibus bill. It brings together a number of settlements, as is well known, and it will come out of the Select Committee as 4 bills. I particularly want to say something about Part 11, which will become the Haka Kamate Attribution Bill. That is a really interesting piece of legislation. As Dr. Sharple said, a lot of work needed to be spent on that because it's a new territory. We've had Y262, we've had the World Intellectual Property Organisation looking at how we go about protecting traditional cultural expressions, and this is a very first step. The important thing is that that legislation contains a review clause so that in 5 years' time we can have a further look at it in the light of recent international developments. So I'm very, very pleased that we've reached that stage, that we'll be able to look at traditional cultural expressions such as the haka, and this is the first step. And I always recall the day that we signed the agreement in principle in the Legislative Council chamber, and there was no headline in the paper dealing with the amount or the land or the history, but simply the headline, All Black Haka goes to Maoris. And I wondered about the Dominion Post then, and I wonder about them now. So finally, I want to commend this bill to the House into the safe hands of that great New Zealander, Mr. Tau Henare. I know that he's as keen as mustard to get onto this bill, to get it back to the House as quickly as possible, Mr. Henare, so that it can be legislated and so that the people of Titauihu can get on with building their putia.
The Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
Tēnā koe.